History remembers him as a conqueror, a unifier, the founder of the largest contiguous empire the world has ever known. But beneath the titles lies a different story, one written in blood and carved into the bones of 40 million dead. This is the story of Temüjin, the boy who would become Genghis Khan, the Scourge of God. His path to power began not with a crown, but with the murder of his own brother over a single fish. He learned early that in the unforgiving world of the steppe, survival belonged not to the good, but to the utterly ruthless. The kidnapping of his new wife, Borte, ignited the first true fire of his rage, setting him on a path of bloody retribution that would never end. He did not just rescue her, he annihilated the tribe responsible, the Merkits, hunting them down and slaughtering them to the last man. This was his first lesson in total war. Do not just defeat your enemies, erase them from the earth so they may never threaten you again. To unify the warring tribes of Mongolia, Temüjin waged a campaign of systematic terror and extermination against his rivals. He betrayed his childhood friend and blood brother, Jamaka, hunting him down as an enemy of his ambition. The world of the steppes was not large enough for two masters, and only one could survive the bloody crucible of unification. His cruelty against the rival Tatar tribe became legend. After defeating them in battle, he ordered the execution of every Tatar male taller than the linchpin of a cart wheel. It was a methodical genocide, designed to wipe their very bloodline from existence, a chillingly practical act of ethnic cleansing that left thousands of orphaned children and widows in its wake. In the year 1206, at a great assembly known as a Kurultai, the chieftains of the now united tribes gave him a new name. He was no longer Temüjin, the outcast. He was Genghis Khan, the oceanic ruler, the universal ruler of the Mongol nation. This was not just a coronation, it was the unleashing of a storm upon the world. With the steppes united under his iron fist, Genghis Khan turned his gaze outward, to the rich, settled civilizations that had for so long looked down upon the nomads. His first target was the kingdom of Western Xia, a prosperous empire that controlled the lucrative Silk Road. Their high walls and disciplined armies would be the first to test the true horror of the Mongol war machine. The Mongols were masters of siege warfare, not through complex engineering, but through sheer, unadulterated brutality. They would drive thousands of captured prisoners before their armies, forcing them to build siege works and fill moats with their own bodies. These human shields absorbed the enemy's arrows and despair, a living testament to the futility of resistance. At the siege of the Western Xia capital, Yinchuan, Genghis Khan attempted to divert a nearby river to flood the city into submission. The plan backfired when the dike broke, flooding his own camp instead. Enraged by this failure, he pressed the siege with even greater ferocity, his anger translating into a death sentence for the city's inhabitants. Though the Western Xia eventually surrendered, they would not be forgiven for their defiance. They were made a vassal state, their king forced to give his daughter in marriage to the Khan. But a seed of vengeance was planted in Genghis Khan's mind, a promise of future annihilation that he would one day return to fulfill with terrifying totality. Next, the horde turned east to the great Jin dynasty of northern China. At the Battle of Yehuling, known as the Badger's Mouth, the Mongol cavalry decimated a massive Jin army. They did not just win, they slaughtered the enemy, leaving a valley choked with corpses, a testament to the superiority of their brutal, lightning-fast tactics. The ultimate prize was the Jin capital, Zhongdu, the city we now know as Beijing. The siege was a relentless, year-long nightmare. The Mongols cut off all supplies, slowly starving the defenders. The city descended into a hellscape of famine and desperation, a slow, agonizing death sentence for over 1 million souls trapped within its walls. Inside Zhongdu, the horror was unimaginable. The price of grain skyrocketed until it was worth more than gold. Citizens turned to cannibalism, first eating the dead, then hunting the weak in the streets. The city consumed itself from within, driven mad by the relentless pressure of the Mongol horde waiting patiently outside its gates. When Zhongdu finally fell in 1215, the Mongol fury was unleashed in a month-long orgy of destruction. The soldiers were given free rein to pillage, rape, and murder. The city was set ablaze, and the fires raged for weeks, consuming palaces, temples, and homes. The screams of the dying were drowned out by the roar of the flames. An eyewitness who visited the ruins months later reported that the streets were still slick and greasy with the rendered fat of the dead. He saw mountains of bones piled high outside the city walls, a monument to the massacre. Zhongdu, one of the world's great cities, had been reduced to a smoldering graveyard, a warning to all who would dare defy the Khan. While his armies despoiled the east, Genghis Khan looked west, towards the wealthy Khwarezmian Empire, which stretched across modern-day Iran, Afghanistan, and Central Asia. Initially, he did not want war. He sent a vast trade caravan, seeking an alliance and access to the riches of the Silk Road. It was a rare offer of peace from the Mongol conqueror. But the governor of the frontier city of Otrar, a man named Inalchuq, was greedy and paranoid. Suspecting the merchants were spies, or simply wanting their valuable goods, he seized the entire caravan. He then made a fatal mistake. He executed all 450 merchants, an act of breathtaking stupidity and arrogance that would doom millions to a horrific death. When news reached Genghis Khan, his legendary temper flared. Still, he practiced restraint. He sent 3 more envoys to the Khwarezmian Shah, Mohammed II, demanding that the governor of Otrar be handed over for punishment. He offered the Shah one last chance to avert a war that would drown his empire in blood. The Shah's response was the ultimate insult. He had the chief ambassador executed, and to show his utter contempt, he had the beards of the other 2 envoys shaved off and burned, a mark of deepest humiliation. He then sent them back to the Khan. In doing so, Shah Mohammed did not just declare war, he signed the death warrant for his entire civilization. Upon seeing his humiliated envoys, Genghis Khan reportedly went to a mountaintop to pray. He removed his hat, bared his head to the sky, and for 3 days and nights he lamented, asking the heavens for the strength to enact a vengeance so terrible it would be spoken of for 1,000 years. When he descended, his face was a mask of cold, implacable fury. There would be no mercy. He gathered an army of over 100,000 of his most hardened warriors. But instead of taking the direct route, he did the impossible. He led his army on a secret, terrifying march through the supposedly impassable Kizil-Kum desert, flanking the Khwarezmian defenses completely. They emerged from the wasteland like ghosts, appearing where no army should ever be. The first city to feel his wrath was, fittingly, Otrar. The siege was merciless. The governor, Inalchuq, fought desperately, knowing the fate that awaited him. But the city's fall was inevitable. The Mongols swarmed over the walls, and the slaughter began. No one was spared. The city was punished collectively for the crime of its governor. Inalchuq was captured alive. He was not given a quick death. Genghis Khan, in a display of poetic, horrifying justice, ordered that molten silver be poured into the governor's eyes and ears. He was to die from the very metals he had coveted, his senses burning away in unimaginable agony, a lesson to all rulers who dared to harm a Mongol envoy. From Otrar, the horde swept towards Bokhara, a jewel of the Islamic world, a center of learning and culture. The city's Turkish garrison, overconfident, rode out to meet the Mongols in open battle. It was a fatal error. The Mongols feigned a retreat, lured the garrison into a trap, and annihilated them to a man. The city was now defenseless. The terrified leaders of Bokhara surrendered the city, hoping for mercy. Genghis Khan rode into the city's grand mosque, a sacred space, and ascended the pulpit. Looking down at the terrified elite, he delivered a chilling proclamation. "I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." What followed was not mercy. The city was given over to the Mongol soldiers. They looted every home, raped the women, and dragged the men away for slave labor or as future human shields. The city's great library, filled with priceless manuscripts, was destroyed. The hay for the Mongol horses was stored in the mosque, its holy books trampled underfoot. After it was thoroughly plundered, Genghis Khan ordered Bokhara to be burned. The city, built mostly of wood, became a raging inferno. The only structure left standing was the stone Kalyan minaret, which so impressed the Khan that he spared it. It stood as a lonely tombstone over the ashes of a once great city and its 30,000 murdered inhabitants. Next came Samarkand, the magnificent capital of the Khwarezmian Empire. The Shah had garrisoned the city with his best troops and war elephants, confident its walls could hold. But Genghis Khan had no intention of a long siege. He used thousands of captured prisoners from Bokhara, forcing them to the front lines to absorb the defenders' arrows and fill the city's moat. A group of the city's defenders, hoping to win favor, betrayed their comrades and opened a gate. The Mongols poured in. The garrison of 50,000 soldiers was cornered and systematically butchered. The war elephants, symbols of Khwarezmian power, were terrified by Mongol fire arrows and stampeded, adding to the chaos and carnage within the walls. The civilian population of Samarkand was marched out onto a plain outside the city. There, the methodical slaughter began. The artisans and skilled craftsmen were spared, to be sent back to Mongolia as slaves for the empire. Everyone else, men, women, and children, was executed. The blood of hundreds of thousands soaked into the thirsty earth. Meanwhile, the great Shah Mohammed II, the man who had started this inferno, had fled. He ran like a coward, abandoning his people and his empire. The Mongol generals Jib and Subutai, with 20,000 men, were dispatched on one of history's greatest and most terrifying pursuits, hunting the fleeing king across his own collapsing empire. The Shah never stopped running, his terror so great that he dared not stand and fight. He was hounded from city to city, his authority crumbling before him. Finally, he took refuge on a tiny, desolate island in the Caspian Sea. There, broken, alone, and suffering from pleurisy, the once mighty emperor died in rags, a pathetic end for the man who defied the Khan. With the capital in ruins, the Mongols turned to the city of Urgench, the old Khwarezmian heartland. This would be the site of the most complete and horrifying destruction of the entire campaign. The city resisted fiercely, and the fighting was brutal, house-to-house combat in the narrow streets. The Mongols suffered heavy casualties, and their rage grew with every loss. To break the stalemate, the Mongols employed their most hellish tactics. They used siege engines to hurl pots of burning naphtha into the city, turning entire districts into inescapable firestorms. Captured civilians were used as battering rams, forced to run at fortified positions until they were cut down, their bodies forming ramps for the attackers who followed. Once the city fell, the true horror began. The surviving population was marched out and divided. The skilled artisans, as usual, were enslaved. The young women and children were given to the Mongol soldiers as spoils of war. The rest of the population, numbering over 1 million people, was assigned to the soldiers to be executed, with each warrior responsible for killing 24 people. But even this was not enough for the enraged Khan. To ensure that Urgench would never rise again, he gave a final, chilling order. He had his engineers divert the nearby Amu Darya River, breaking the dams and sending its powerful current directly into the city. The water surged through the streets, washing away the blood, toppling the remaining buildings, and submerging the ruins in a muddy tomb. The city of Merv was once known as the Queen of the World, a center of science, culture, and trade. When the Mongol general Tolui, Genghis Khan's youngest son, arrived, he offered a chillingly simple choice: surrender and live, or resist and die. The city's leaders, hearing tales of the horrors elsewhere, chose to surrender, hoping to save their people from the sword. The promise of mercy was a lie. The entire population of Merv, men, women, and children, was methodically marched out onto a plain. They were ordered to bring their most valuable possessions with them. After the loot was collected, the population was divided among the soldiers, who were ordered to execute them. The slaughter was dispassionate and organized, a bureaucratic extermination. A Persian chronicler wrote that a holy man spent 13 days and nights counting the corpses. He counted 1,300,000 bodies before giving up in exhaustion and despair. The scale of the killing was so vast it defied comprehension. Merv, the queen of the world, was now a silent, open grave under the Central Asian sun. But the most infamous massacre was yet to come, at the city of Nishapur. The campaign here was personal. During the initial siege, Tokuchar, Genghis Khan's favorite son-in-law, was killed by an arrow shot from the city walls. When the Khan learned of his death, his grief curdled into a terrible, cold rage that demanded a vengeance beyond mere slaughter. The Khan's widowed daughter, grief-stricken and vengeful, requested that she be allowed to oversee the city's destruction and that every living thing in Nishapur be killed as retribution. Genghis Khan granted her wish. When the city fell, the order was given: spare nothing. No human, no animal, no living creature was to be left alive to draw breath within the ruins. The massacre at Nishapur was carried out with a horrifying, systematic thoroughness. The population was herded into the open and butchered. To ensure no one was feigning death or hiding among the corpses, every body was decapitated. The soldiers went through the city's houses and alleys, slaughtering the city's cats and dogs, their cries mingling with those of the dying humans. To complete the monument of his vengeance, Genghis Khan ordered that the severed heads of the men, women, and children of Nishapur be stacked in great, grisly pyramids. These horrifying structures stood as a silent, screaming testament to the price of defying the Mongol Empire. It was a message written in bone and blood, designed to paralyze future enemies with pure, abject terror. The tales of these atrocities spread faster than the Mongol armies themselves. This was psychological warfare on a continental scale. Entire cities and kingdoms would surrender without a fight, their leaders so terrified by the stories from Bokhara, Merv, and Nishapur that they chose subjugation over annihilation. The fear of the horde became the Khan's most effective weapon. The wake of the Mongol invasion was a depopulated world. Vast regions of Persia and Central Asia, once thriving with cities and farms, were reduced to barren wastelands. So many people were killed that farmland returned to forest. The death toll was so immense, it is believed to have caused a brief, measurable cooling of the planet's climate by removing millions of farmers from the land. To control his vast, blood-won empire, Genghis Khan instituted a harsh law code known as the Yasa. It was brutally efficient. The penalty for almost any serious crime, theft, adultery, bearing false witness, urinating in a river, was death. Order was maintained not through justice, but through the ever-present threat of swift and merciless execution. In his final years, Genghis Khan turned his attention back to the first foreign enemy he had conquered, the Tanguts of the Western Zia. During the Khwarezmian campaign, they had refused to provide troops, an act of betrayal the Khan would not forgive. He returned not to conquer, but to erase. This would be his final, most complete act of genocide. The campaign against the Tanguts was one of extermination. The order was to kill everyone, to destroy the cities, to burn their books, and to wipe their very language from the face of the earth. The Mongol armies moved through the kingdom like a plague of locusts, leaving nothing but ruins and silence in their wake. An entire civilization was systematically and deliberately annihilated. It was during this final, bloody campaign in 1227 that Genghis Khan died. The cause of his death remains a mystery, shrouded in legend. Some say he fell from his horse, others that he was killed by a captured Tangut princess, or perhaps he succumbed to a fever. His end, like his life, is a subject of dark speculation and fear. His death was kept a secret to prevent the demoralization of his army and the rebellion of his enemies. His body was carried back to Mongolia for burial in a secret, unmarked grave. The funeral procession was a river of death. Every person and animal that crossed its path was killed to ensure they could not report what they had seen. The slaves who built his tomb were executed once their work was complete. The soldiers who executed the slaves were themselves executed by a final escort. This last group of loyal guards rode away, leaving no one alive who knew the location of the Conqueror's final resting place. The greatest killer in history was buried in a tomb sealed by blood. The legacy of Genghis Khan is a paradox written in blood. He was a unifier, a brilliant strategist, a lawgiver who created an empire that fostered trade and communication across continents on the famous Silk Road. He connected east and west like no one before him, and his descendants would rule vast swathes of the known world for generations. But this empire was built on a foundation of skulls. The cost of his unification was the death of an estimated 40 million people, perhaps as much as 10% of the world's population at the time. He did not just conquer cities, he erased them. He did not just defeat armies, he annihilated entire peoples. His peace, the Pax Mongolica, was a peace born of utter, paralyzing terror. So we are left with the question, conqueror or butcher? Perhaps the truth is that he was both, and that one was inseparable from the other. He was a visionary who saw a united world, but his vision could only be realized through a nightmare of slaughter. He was a force of history more akin to a natural disaster than a man, a human earthquake who shattered the world and remade it in his own brutal image. The path he carved across the globe was one of fire, blood, and bone. His name echoed through the centuries not just as a symbol of power, but as a whisper of absolute terror, a reminder of the depths of cruelty one man can inflict upon the world in the pursuit of ultimate dominion. The shadow of his horde still lingers over the lands he bled dry.